There's no one like you, and there never will be.
From the producer of Bohemian Rhapsody, there are many legends, but there is only one. Michael, rated PG-13, in theaters April 24.
Amazon presents Jeff versus Taco Truck Salsa. Whether it's Verde, Roja, or the orange one. For Jeff, trying any salsa is like playing Russian roulette with a flamethrower. Luckily, Jeff saved with Amazon and stocked up on antacids, ginger tea, and milk. Habanero? More like habanero, yes. Save the everyday with Amazon.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
Instagram teen accounts have automatic protections for what teens see and who can contact them, plus time management tools. And Instagram will continue adding built-in safety features to help create age-appropriate experiences. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teen accounts.
Hello and welcome to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. I'm Teacup.
And I'm She-Cup, and we are so excited to bring you this podcast dedicated to unraveling all the mysteries woven in to the Assassin's Creed universe.
Each episode will be diving into a different lore discussion, from Pieces of Eden, solar flares, and the Isu to the Hidden Ones, the Order of Ancients, and of course, the Animus. We will seek to uncover it all.
So step into the Animus, join us in the shadows, and maybe even take a leap of faith. Hello and welcome to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. I'm Shelby, and you also know me as She-Cup, and I'm back with another episode, and I'm joined here with my co-host.
Hey, I am Austin or Teacup, and I am excited to be back on this episode of the Assassin's Creed Lorecast.
Yeah, so we're back with another Assassin versus Templar episode. So, Austin, why don't you just lead it right in?
All right, so this is Assassin versus Templar, and today we are talking about Malcolm X. And so, just a little bit of a disclaimer here. Shelby, you, I know, are aware and everything. This is kind of our first real, I would consider maybe controversial character, historical character.
Yeah, especially if you're of a certain age.
Yes. And I think that discourse around Malcolm X, he gets compared to MLK a lot because they're contemporaries of each other. And I think that that is a conversation that can be had. However, that's not the purpose of what we're here. We're not here to pass any kind of defining statement on, are his methods moral? Are his methods effective? I just feel that, one, that's not the purpose of our podcast, and I don't think that we're helpful people to have that discourse.
No, we're not. And we dive into politics, of course, but we're not here to pass judgment on every single thing a person does. We're here to talk about the choices a person makes and how that reflects on the Assassins or the Templars. That's why we're here. Yes. So that's what we're going to stick to.
And I will just say that with all these, this is very, very surface level, very high view of his life. It is very, very nuanced and very, very detailed. And there are books and website pages and articles upon articles written and dedicated to this man and the beliefs that he founded and the other things that are around there. I will also note that we are going to talk about the Nation of Islam in this podcast, in this episode, which is its own kind of group that also has some charged opinions about it. And I just want to say, again, we're not here to discuss the merits of Islam as a religion. That is not the purpose of this
Yeah, well,
podcast.
I do think it's important to say that like the Nation of Islam and like the Muslim faith are different things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. And so I just wanted to give those little disclaimers because of to just say that I acknowledge that what I'm going to say is going to be lacking for talking about the nuance of this historical character, and that I'm not trying to give a large overview or synopsis or give the definitive, yes, this is what this man represented, and yes, this is what he would have been, and he would have condoned this situation in every situation.
Right.
And I think we will find even in this that I don't think we could say how he would react to every single situation.
Well, I don't think we can say that about anybody. But as we say on every Assassin versus Templar episode is that we are not giving a biography of this person. We are picking and choosing the events from their lives that are relevant to the discussion of would they be part of the Assassins or the Templars.
Yes. And I also want to say that given the time frame, we will be talking about extreme points in the U.S. history of racism and segregation. And so if that is a trigger for you, it might just be best to skip this episode.
Yeah. Let's dive right in.
All right. So Malcolm X, or also born Malcolm Little, I will acknowledge that, but Malcolm X is the name that he chooses for himself. And so I will be referring to him as Malcolm X throughout this podcast because that's what he wanted to be referred to as. He is an African-American revolutionary and black nationalist leader who rose from a background of poverty, family disruption, criminal activity to a prominent figure during the civil rights movement. Now, I will want to say here there are so many players in the civil rights movements. A lot of time when we have discourse about the civil rights movement, we go right to Rosa Parks and MLK, which are great and wonderful examples of civil rights leaders. But there are so many, many more. The first one comes to mind is obviously James Cone, just because he is relevant in our field.
Well, he's an academic, but yeah.
Yeah. Yes, he is a civil rights leader. Probably one of, again, another one that's really, really talked about with the other two I mentioned. He also discovered, it is quote that he discovered the religious organization, the Nation of Islam, while in prison and served as its spokesperson from 1952 to 1964. He did not found the Nation of Islam. I think that is an important distinction. Sometimes that he gets credited with that kind of
that's
stuff.
what I had always heard.
No,
I think that's a common misconception.
Yeah, it is much older than him. Or not much older, but it is a couple decades older than him. But he really kind of propels it forward into national recognition to where it needs to. And like Shelby said, the Nation of Islam is an activist group. That is not like the official name of the Islamic faith or the Muslim faith. The Nation of Islam is a worldwide organization, but has a lot of strong roots in American history and the United States.
Haven't they been declared a hate group?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
So he was a vocal advocate for black empowerment and the promotion of Islam within the African American community. This is really important because MLK, James Cone, Rosa Parks, a lot of the civil rights activists are Christian.
Most of them
either Southern Baptist or American Baptist in their denomination. He is not. He is raised Christian, but when he goes to prison, he joins the Nation of Islam and converts to Islam as a religion.
So that's kind of like our first point of disagreement's maybe not the right word, but divergence between him and like the rest of the movement. And
I think that there is a strong divergence with Malcolm X and the rest of the civil rights leaders that will come into. And I think that I will say it this way, in a way that I think audiences who are listening to would understand. The way that Killmonger in Black Panther, his ideologies that he's putting forward against T'Challa, that is the discourse that is happening.
Yeah.
In a different light, but that is the discourse that happens.
It's very clear what they took inspiration from when writing those scripts.
Those comics come about in the aftermath of this time period. And so that's important. As I said, he was born Malcolm Little, but he is referred to as Malcolm X. He was born on May 19th in 1925. It is weird to think about that I knew someone who was born before Malcolm X, which was my great-grandmother who was born in 1912.
That's crazy.
The fourth of 7 children. Again, another Malcolm X and I have in common is that we are the fourth child.
Oh my God. Okay.
That is the only thing we have in common.
Let's move on.
And then, so his father, Earl, what a name, was a local leader in the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or the UNIA, and his mother, Louise, served as secretary and branch reporter, sending news of local UNIA activities to Negro World, and instilled in their children a sense of self-reliance and Black pride in their children. I want to diverge here because I think that this kind of thing that is instilled in him by his parents is another point of divergence with him and the other civil rights leaders, because the other civil rights leaders are very much in a lines of like, we can work together with the rest of the country, not for good or for ill or whatever. And Malcolm X very much comes along and says, no, we have to look out for ourselves because no one else is going to look out for us.
Yeah.
And that's a big discourse that comes into there.
Yeah, I think we'll probably get into that later when we talk more about his politics as an adult, but like that makes sense because he becomes this like separatist movement, basically.
Mm-hmm. Very, very much so. So growing up, he experienced obviously the racism and violence that most Black people, especially Black men, experienced at this time, not only from the KKK, but another white supremacist group known as the Black Legion, which I don't know much about them, and I didn't really dig that far into them. When he was 6, his father died in what has been officially ruled as a streetcar accident, though his mother believed that he was murdered by the Black Legion. Rumor that white racists were responsible for his father's deaths were widely circulated and were very disturbing to Malcolm. And I think that given the time frame and given everything surrounding this around Black men and their murders and deaths at the hand of white supremacist groups, it's probably true.
Well, especially since he was a leader in an organization, it's likely.
Yes. That's my own kind of take on reading all of that.
Let's not dive into conspiracy theories because we do not have enough time.
No. And so he then kind of turns to a life of crime in his early years, which eventually leads him into prison. This is nothing like super, super major. It's more like his crimes of poverty. So petty theft, obviously like break-ins,
stealing bread, that kind of stuff.
Like things like that are kind of in there. And like he runs in with some gangs and starts pushing like drugs. But it's very much so of the lines of, I engage in criminal activity because I see it as my only means to survive and make money versus I enjoy it. Mm-hmm. And that is a very intrinsic distinction that I think will come up in our discussion for Assassins in Templar. So he meets a fellow convict named John Brimby, a self-educated man that he later described as the first man I had ever seen command total respect with words. I can see the gears in Shelby's head turning of how she can already see how this is going to play out.
Well, and you know the story, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
But like she knows, like I can see you piecing together your opinion already.
I'm putting my argument together.
Yes. It's also in prison that he joins the Nation of Islam, and he takes such a hostile take on Christianity that it earns him the nickname Satan in prison. And I want to pause here, and this is really important distinction. Malcolm X is not born in the South.
Exactly. That was something I was going to bring up.
He is not from the South. He's not in the middle of Birmingham. Mm-hmm. He's not in, Mississippi or in Nashville where all these huge civil rights things are. He's from Nebraska.
Yeah.
A quote unquote. Well, if we go into the thing, like Nebraska, I believe, was a free state. Like it entered in as a free state or whatever. But like that's a point that like we kind of harp on because we are Southerners. Like the entire country is racist at this point. Like it's not isolated to the Southeast. It's a huge kind of thing. And like,
well, I'll just give a little disclaimer here. I did read this book last summer about the KKK, and basically the argument was like the KKK was not just in the South, which like we all know, but like per capita versus like percentage of KKK like groups and members to population, like the highest numbers were actually in like Ohio, the Midwest versus the South. And so I don't know if I have the words to like say how that would have affected this situation, because Nebraska is far from Ohio, but I do think that there is an interesting dichotomy there of like, okay, well, he obviously did not have the like Christian community that they had in the South. That's a huge part of like being resilient. And then whether or not he dealt with more or less violence, we don't know. We know that he obviously did. But I think those are some interesting and important factors to bring up.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. It is in prison that he is put on an FBI watch list for the first time.
Probably because he's anti-Christian.
Yes. And I think that this comes into point, and we might talk about it later, but like he specifically cites American Christianity's participation in racism as the source of his hostility towards them.
Fair. I think it's fair.
And I can't argue with the man. And so after prison, he will work for the Nation of Islam, eventually distancing himself from them after a little bit as he becomes more workable with the other civil rights leaders. And we'll get into these kind of beliefs that get in here. But one thing that Malcolm X really, really holds to is the belief that violent protest should be on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important distinction of here. He never really argues as it being the first reaction. He never argues to begin with violence.
Yeah.
He argues that it should be on the table.
Yeah. Well, and I just also want to point out, like, we're not condoning violence at all here, but I think that there is a difference between, destroying violently property versus being violent against another person. Mm-hmm. Like, those are different levels that we can discuss.
Right. And I think that it comes down to, like, this is something that I don't want to say is an Islamic belief, because it's not. Because they do treat the thing. But, like, in the Christian, especially the Southern raised Christian, like, these lessons of turn the other cheek and all these other points of, like, that are kind of the foundation of nonviolent resistance would have been instilled in the Southern leaders a lot more. Whereas I think that Malcolm X was in a point of, like, we have to look out for ourselves, and we're never going to gain the respect we deserve. We're never going to gain the freedom and justice we deserve if we sit idly by while our oppressors continue to oppress us.
Right. Absolutely right. And I also think it should be brought up that, like, there are movements in history where Christians have committed violence, like, just because they are doing evil things, but also because they thought they were doing the right thing. I think most first of Dietrich Bonhoeffer in World War II, participates in this resistance against the Nazis and, like, tries to kill Hitler because he truly believes that doing that will save more lives in the end. And I don't fault him for that. I don't think any of us can.
I think it comes down to the point of, like, it is a discourse that religious groups across the globe, regardless of faith origin, have come to term of, like, we hold these tenets that life is sacred and that we should protect life and we should be kind and we should be peaceful when we have all these things. But what do you do when someone extremely threatens the core belief that all life is sacred?
What do you do when someone is committing mass murder?
Mm-hmm.
A genocide.
I mean, and like as you mentioned, Dietrich Bonhoeffer comes to the conclusion that his greater moral responsibility is to stop him than it is to adhere to the nonviolent tenets of Christianity.
Yeah.
So he distanced himself from the Nation of Islam, and he is assassinated in 1965.
Before MLK, but after JFK.
Yes. The 60s were just a wild time.
Violent.
For assassination.
Well, and not just assassination, but for murder in general. Like the 60s are really when serial killers first become a thing. It was a violent time.
I guess I blame the drugs.
I wouldn't. I mean, like weed doesn't make you inherently violent.
I guess that's true. So we're going to talk about his beliefs now for a little bit. We're going to talk about his beliefs while in the Nation of Islam, and then his beliefs while outside the Nation of Islam. Malcolm X taught that black people were the original people of the world, and that the whites were a race of devils who were created by an evil scientist named Jacob.
Which is, to be fair, kind of the opposite of what, racist Christians taught of white people were the original people of the world and black people were created when Ham fell in Adam and Eve's or Noah's children, and then that's how black people came to the world.
Yes.
So it's kind of the opposite in a way.
I have a lot to say about this, but it's related to the Assassin Templar thing. So
Okay. We'll put a pin in it.
When questioned concerning his statements that the white peoples were devil, Malcolm X said, "History proves the white man is a devil. Anybody who rapes, plunders, and enslaves, and steals, and drops hell bombs on people, anyone who does these things is nothing but a devil."
I mean, slavery alone, right? But no, I don't think it's a helpful comparison because no people group is innocent.
Correct. People suck.
The end.
Malcolm X said that Islam was the true religion of black humankind, and that Christianity was the white man's religion and had been imposed on African Americans by their slave masters. He said that the Nation of Islam followed Islam as it was practiced around the world, but the nation's teaching varied from those other Muslims because they were adapted to the uniquely pitiful condition of the people in the United States. He taught that Wallace Fard Muhammad was the founder of the nation. The founder of the nation was God incarnate, and that Elijah Muhammad was his messenger or prophet. Okay, we're going to pause here for just a couple of disclaimers. Christianity was founded in Africa.
Yeah.
I just had to say that.
Well, and Christianity is also much older than Islam.
Yes.
And Judaism is much older than Christianity.
Correct. All three religions trace their origins back to the same family. And I think that's an important distinction, but I do think that the specific part of Africa that the European slave traders took people from was not Christian.
Yeah. It's more southern than that.
Yes.
North Africa is a lot closer to the Middle East.
Right. And I think that it's important to note that Egypt is mentioned in the Bible. Ethiopia is mentioned in the Bible. These African countries are mentioned
all over the place.
Mm-hmm. And I think I once wrote a paper in seminary that was talking about the folly of evangelism in Africa, and the premise was basically that how can we evangelize to its birthplace?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how can we evangelize to a people group that has so much more history than we do?
Right, and history with the religion we're trying to convert them to.
Yeah, specifically.
So that's it. I do think it's interesting here. I think this is one of the first beliefs to go with the Nation of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think he comes down to one, I don't think that the other civil rights leaders would be okay with the last statement.
That
about
Muhammad was the messenger or the prophet.
Yes, that Elijah, Muhammad, these men that were alive.
Mm-hmm.
Then this is not Muhammad, the actual prophet of Islam.
Right.
This is different people with that last name. I think they would be fine with him being a practicer of Islam. I think that they would be as okay as someone in the 60s could be.
Yeah, I think he was always going to be different.
Right. But I think the proclamation that a human being among them was God incarnate would be too much for the other civil rights leaders.
But it's also funny because that's exactly what we believe as Christians.
Right. And I think that is why it's
That's why, yeah.
That's why it's the issue. So while the civil rights movement fought against racial segregation, Malcolm, while in the Nation of Islam, advocated for the complete separation of blacks from whites. Now, this is an important distinction because segregation, not the same as isolation. And I think that's an important distinction because segregation is something that has been imposed on a group of people for how they look. Malcolm X is arguing for isolation of banding together to have a more close-knit community. And I think small doses of this are fine. I think people do this. They want to be around people who are like-minded of them. They want to keep that close-knit circle. If they're outside that close-knit circle, they long to come back for it. I think the problem arises when you insist that that's the only reality that you should experience.
Right, sure.
But yes, but complete separation. And this was another big divergent sticking point. And I think that this stems from the first divergent point that we talked about of, oh, we can work together. We need to live alongside the white people and the rest of the people of the Americas. No, we should be self-reliant. We can only look after ourselves. We should separate ourselves from them.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard to reconcile the two groups because that kind of social isolationism, whether you think we need to do that within the U.S. or create your own country, whatever, it goes against the entire principles of integration.
Yes. Malcolm suggested that the U.S. government owed reparations to black people for the unpaid labor of their ancestors. He rejected the civil rights movement of nonviolence and advocated instead black people should defend themselves. And as I said, important distinction. He is not arguing, even at this point in the Nation of Islam, which I think at this point is classified as an extremist group, maybe not a hate group, but an extremist. He is not advocating for offensive movement. He says they have a right to defend themselves.
Right. A right to self-defense.
Yes.
Which we do have that in this country.
We do. So that's really his main beliefs there. Let's do our mid-break, and then we can go into his later views.
All right, let's do it.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
You look like the one thing in the world that Alcibiades wouldn't take to bed. Can you even see out of that thing?
Mock all you want. When those Malakas and Zakros see this beast charging towards them, they will know fear!
Let's start light. Tell me a joke.
Why must samurai always battle one another? Because there is only one way for a samurai to get ahead. Ahead. I did not say it was a good joke.
Makose! Shoot! Shoot the flying demon!
Well, welcome to the middle of the show. This is where we take time to talk about all the things that have to do with the Assassin's Creed lore cast and not the lore of Assassin's Creed. The first thing that we do every week is thank all of our amazing patrons. Thank you all so much for your support. We greatly appreciate it. And if you want to become a patron, you can do so for as little as $5 a month if you go to patreon.com/ACLorecast. Another great way to support us is to leave us a rating or a review. You can leave one on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to the podcast. If you leave us one that's kind words, 5 stars, we will read it out on a future episode of the show. And we don't have one to read today. So if you leave one as you're listening to this, it might get read out on the next episode. And the last thing I have to talk about is our Discord server. If you want to come hang out, talk about Assassin's Creed or any other games, it's the place to be. You can find the link in the episode description. And with that, I think we can get back into it.
All right, let's do it.
Half Man, the new HBO original limited series from Baby Reindeer creator Richard Gadd, examines the tumultuous relationship between two estranged brothers, tracking the highs and lows of the pair over the course of 40 years. Starring Emmy Award winner Richard Gadd and BAFTA Award winner Jamie Bell. Half Man premieres April 23rd on HBO Max.
Kraft Mac and Cheese is better than 90s hip-hop. We'll remind you of your childhood without making you feel incredibly old. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Best thing ever.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
No, you're right. Let's all just screw around while the world falls to pieces.
Hey, this isn't easy, you know.
Right, like we're all on vacation out here? Enough! Look, everyone's under a lot of pressure, but we're the only ones who can stop Abstergo, so we need to keep it together.
She's right. We need to be a hive mind, people.
Anybody up for some reconciliatory yoga? Anyone?
Very funny, guys.
You have my thanks. Keep the sword, Ezio. Do I know you from somewhere? Don't you recognize me? It's me, Mario! Uncle Mario? It's been too long, Nipote. Far too long.
Malaka.
This is where I think Malcolm X's life changes, because he becomes this prominent person. And so these other national groups start inviting him to come and speak and experience these places. And one of the first places he goes is Palestine. I want to note that Israel is a very new country at this point.
Like 20 years old.
Right. Like very, very much. And I think if you don't understand a lot about the history, one of the biggest sticking points here is that the Allied powers at the end of World War II decided, I think in an effort to try to do something good, hastily decided to establish the nation of Israel.
They wanted to give the Jewish people a homeland to go back to because they were all displaced.
Right sentiment, wrong execution. There are obviously people already living there that this displaces, that this disrupts. And so you have this tension between Palestine and Israel. The UN officially recognizes Israel because that's who the Allied powers set up. Lots of tension occur here.
That is still going on today.
Yes. It is still going on today. So he goes into the Palestinian refugee camps and immediately draws direct parallels between the subjugation of Black Americans and the displacement of the Palestinians. And he basically says the same white supremacy that lynches Black people in the America, bombs villages in the Congo, and bulldozes homes in Palestine. And I think this is a big turning point for him in realizing that his view has been a little too narrow. I think that's an important thing here, because he now views that it's not just Black Americans that are suffering. This is a global problem.
Right. Absolutely.
And so he heads a few weeks after this, he goes to Cairo and meets with members of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. So I think that the Nation of Islam at this point takes issue with his trying to broaden what's happening here, and they start having differences of opinion, and he leaves. It is after this that he says he's willing to work with the leaders of the civil rights movement. He advocated for some changes in policies, though. He felt like if they called it civil rights, it would keep the issue in the United States. He wanted to change the focus to human rights. The movement can bring its complaints before the United Nations, where Malcolm said the emerging nations of the world would add their support. He also argued that if the U.S. government was unwilling or unable to protect black people should protect themselves. He said that he and other members of the Organization of Afro-American Unity were determined to defend themselves from aggressors and to secure freedom, justice, and equality by whatever means necessary. And again, I think that it is focused, targeted violence. It is not violence for violence sake. It is violence to secure freedom, justice, and equality and defend themselves from aggressors. Remember that quote for our arguments later. He stressed a global perspective after leaving the Nation of Islam. He gained from his international travels. He emphasized the direct connection between the domestic struggle of African Americans for equal rights with the independent struggles of the third world nations. Now, it is important to note there are a lot of these going on right now. Like the way that the Middle East is set up and a lot of the countries that we're hearing about today in our world started with their independence movement at this time. He no longer calls for the separation of black people from white people. He advocated for black nationalism, which he defined as self-determination for the African American community.
I have so many thoughts, but I want to save them until our discussion.
Okay, so he is mentioned in Assassin's Creed. Very briefly, but I think it is important because I think they hit the nail on the head. He possesses an apple of Eden at some point in his life. We know that from Assassin's Creed 2, I believe. The Nation of Islam is a Templar puppet organization.
That totally tracks, in my opinion.
Muhammad Ali is influenced by the Templars to publicly denounce Malcolm X after he leaves the Nation of Islam. After he leaves the Nation of Islam, it is confirmed by Assassin's Creed databases within the games that he is assassinated on the orders of the Templars.
Okay, follow-up question.
And they steal his apple of Eden.
Okay. That's why they assassinated him. My follow-up question is, do we know if the Templars assassinated Martin Luther King Jr.?
I haven't done the struggle through that, but I believe so.
Well, that would make sense. Fits with the theme.
Mm-hmm. And so with this, I think that by the end of his life, he is too radical for the Templars. And even though he has broadened his perspective in a lot of ways, he's too singularly focused for the Assassins.
All right.
And though he does, I believe, in later lives, more align himself with the Assassins than Templars.
I disagree.
Oh.
I would flip this. I think that he is too singularly focused for the Templars and too radical for the Assassins.
Interesting.
Because, think about it. Yes, it is when he goes to Palestine and begins to broaden that belief system that is when he's kind of like, changing that belief system. But that broadening, that expansion of his beliefs is not a new thing. It's a point he's been building toward that they could have predicted 10 years prior. And so I just feel like this is a man who went to prison and was seen as very charismatic and made some very powerful friends in prison that were Templars. They took him under their wing. He got involved with the Nation of Islam. Their puppet organization basically rises to the top to lead this organization. And then he only cares about his group of people and changing their status in the world. He doesn't care about the other Templar goals. He doesn't care about, controlling the world for Templar purposes. He cares about remaking the world into something that is beneficial for everyone who has been oppressed. And in some ways that fits with the assassins. But I think the assassins would look at him and say, that is too much of a risk for us to take on.
I think that is an apt point. I think where Malcolm X and the Templars would diverge is the Templars want to continue letting the world be as it will be. They just want to be at the helm of the control of it.
Right.
And that is where they would diverge.
Mm-hmm.
When he realizes that they're not really about actually changing the world. That they're not actually about changing the structure and what happens in the world. They're just about changing who's on top.
Mm-hmm.
That's when he's going to peace out.
Yes,
because
I agree.
he does want something different. He doesn't want to, even when he's at one of his most radical points, which I think is when he argues for separation versus and like against basically he argues against integration. I think at that point he is still at the point of we need to make our own world where we call the shots so it's different than the world that we have.
Mm-hmm.
The Templars are all about we just need to control the world and we can stop the violence, but we're going to be the ones who control. We're going to leave the world as it is, but we'll be in control.
Right, exactly. They want to be in charge. They want to be in power. They want to change some things, but they don't want to change everything. They want to change the things that benefit them.
Yes. I think his issue with the assassins is the assassins are too willing to let the patterns of the world continue over. Mm-hmm. They're assassins, in a way, I think their biggest flaw is that they are willing to just let the cycles continue as long as there are assassins there to end things. And I think that's one of the points where Desmond's sacrifice is so poignant, because Juno basically argues for him, or Minerva is like, you can just continue the cycle of the world. Will protect the world, you will emerge and lead these people forward, and everything will continue on the path that it always goes. And Desmond says, no. We're going to have the chance to see what we can do without your meddling.
Yeah.
Very assassin.
Very much so. Very, very, very much so. I do think, things I think are interesting about this topic, though. You can very, very, very much see how the Black Panthers rise up as an inspiration from him, like how he inspired them. You can also very, very clearly see massive fault lines between him and pretty much almost every single other civil rights leader. And like, not every civil rights leader was Christian, but the people who were well known, they definitely were. And the people in power, like the president, the people in charge, they were, even if they were Catholic. The Kennedys are Catholic. But those fault lines, I don't think can be understated.
Yes, I think, and that is a big point here with the civil rights movement and the fault lines in all of that they're mainly Christian and they're bringing all of that. And I think that the point is like, none of the civil rights arguers or civil rights people would argue with Malcolm X in the level of the atrocities that are committed against their people. James Cone wrote a huge book that basically compared the lynching tree to the cross of Jesus.
Right.
And none of them are going to argue the gravity of the situation. They are arguing about the methods in which they resist it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which we are still arguing about to this day.
And I think that an important thing is none of the civil rights leaders would have viewed him as their enemy.
Right, absolutely.
And that is an important distinction. They would have viewed him as someone they disagreed with. They would have viewed him as someone that they thought maybe went too far. but they would have recognized that he was fighting for the same thing, for mostly the same things that they were fighting for.
Well, and look, the government clearly saw all of the civil rights protesters as one singular enemy.
Yes.
I mean, so for all intents and purposes, they're all on the same side.
Right. And they knew that themselves.
Exactly.
And I think that that is something that is underlying. I think a lot of times we like to look at history and say, oh, these were opposing forces, but really they were just differing opinions within the same movement that probably had a mutual respect for each other.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
But I do think that I think he would have been indoctrinated into the Templars in prison, left them, would have agreed with the assassins' ideology and their principles, but would not have joined them.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think the assassins would have wanted him, and I don't think he would have wanted to become an assassin. I think it's mutual.
Mm-hmm. And I think especially in his later life, he doesn't want to tie himself down in dogmatic ideas. And that is a lot that the Assassins and Templars ask you to do.
It's true.
I would not say that the Assassins are overtly dogmatic, but they are dogmatic in their own way.
Dogmatic in, honestly, like not their beliefs as we normally understand it, but in how they represent themselves in public, how they act.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at Altair. The first game in this series, we get an assassin who has broken the #1 rule of assassins. Actually, all of the rules of being an assassin.
There's only like 3.
There's only 3 guys. Like, come on.
Yeah, it's a big deal. But that's where I would land, is that I think that definitely once he breaks away from the Nation of Islam and Templar control, especially with an Apple of Eden, it makes sense that they would get
absolutely
his assassination. But I do think that the assassins eventually would have tried to approach him, and he would have said no, and then as he continued to live his life, they would have been like, yeah, this wasn't the call.
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with that.
All right, I think we can wrap it up.
All right, well, as always, Austin, thank you so much for doing the research. This has been a super interesting dive into an era we don't talk about that often, so thank you for doing the research and bringing it to us. And thank you for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. If you have any lore questions, theories, or topics you'd like us to unpack, join our Cups Podcasting and More Discord server. It is the best place on the internet.
You can also support the show financially and ensure its continuation by becoming a patron at patreon.com/aclorecast. If you enjoyed the show or learned something new today, please subscribe, leave us a review, comment or rating, or join our Patreon.
The Assassin's Creed Lorecast is part of the Robots Radio Podcasting Network. If you enjoyed our show's intro or outro music, give a big shout out to Pipeman Studios.
And until next time, Assassins, and remember, stay in the shadows to serve the light.
When a wasteland detective and a vault girl cross paths, no criminal is safe.
You're both under arrest.
Don't move a muscle if you know what's good for you.
Based in Bethesda's Fallout series, follow Walter and Bunny as they traverse the Texas Commonwealth and New Vegas, busting big crime rings.
We'll need all we can to expand into Vegas territory.
And surviving anything the wasteland can throw at them.
It's him! It's the Mothman!
Featuring a series of nail-biting narratives and guest stars from across the Fallout community.
It's anybody's guess what thrilling case is up next.
War never changes, does it, Bunny?
No, it certainly does not.
True Vault Escapades, a Fallout audio drama. Available anywhere you get podcasts.